Hello again, it's Mr. Marklevitz here to bring you the last lecture video of the year. We made it! After this, some of you will move on to the second course, and we'll continue to have lots of fun. Some of you will graduate, so a big congratulations to you, and some of you will move on to another elective, and that's probably for the best. Now, we've already discussed documentary films and animated films, but today we're going to finish Unit 6 talking about experimental films. So let's jump right into it. Now, when we talk about experimental films, we're talking about non-commercial, typically non-narrative films that really push the boundaries of cinematic expression and challenge the popular norms of filmmaking. These films are not necessarily concerned with the language of film that we've discussed all year. Instead, these films are deliberately unorthodox, and as a result, they can be very difficult to watch and difficult to interpret. This year, some of you watched David Lynch's Eraserhead, and although that wasn't technically an experimental film, it had a lot of experimental elements as it pushed a lot of the standards for what we've come to expect from movies. So when Henry's head pops off in the weird theater box and a baby goat fetus appears where his head used to be, and there's all these little worm-like creatures crawling all over the checkerboard floor, yeah, I think it's safe to say that David Lynch is trying something a little different. But Eraserhead still tells a story, and I think the one thing that these experimental films all have in common is that they tend to be non-narrative, focusing more on the fundamental elements of filmmaking, the mise en scène, the cinematography, the editing, the sound, and then experimenting with different and sometimes exciting new ways to use those elements to create something unique. So let's get into some different categories here. First, we have Surrealism. This was an avant-garde movement popularized in the early 20th centuries by filmmakers like Luis Buñuel and painters like Salvador Dali, who were primarily interested in our subconscious, exploring the various associations that we make between our dreams and our reality. And together, they made one of the most influential experimental films back in 1929 called Un Chien Angelou. You remember that song by the Pixies, right? Slicing up eyeballs! Yeah, this short film influenced everybody, okay? Everybody from, Akira Kurosawa, who called it his favorite film, to Jean Cocteau, who borrowed heavily on its visual elements for his films, Beauty and the Beast and Orpheus. I also think David Lynch, who we've seen twice this year, pulls very heavily from the surrealist film movement, as many of his films explore the idea of dream logic and the depths of our subconscious. But despite their unusual presentation, surrealist films still feature a lot of elements, characters, props, locations that we identify with. The phone might be a banana, but we still recognize the form and the intent. Whereas other experimental films tend to be more abstract, which according to animation historian William Moritz, contain no acting and do not attempt to reference reality or any concrete subjects. They rely on the unique qualities of motion, rhythm, light, and composition inherent in the technical medium of cinema to create emotional experiences. And we're going to see this style later in the week when we watch Len Lai's short film, The Color Box. There are also experimental documentaries, films like Man with a Movie Camera, Koyaanisqatsi, and Baraka, which can definitely be seen as travelogues, which we talked about a few weeks ago, since they take the viewers on exotic locations and show the audience what life is like in other parts of the world. But for the sake of throwing something else on the board, let's just call them experimental films as well. And then there are some avant-garde films that really question, this idea of what is art. I don't even know what to call these films, but some of them really test the audience's patience and play more like a test of endurance. Movies like Andy Warhol's Empire, which is just a static shot of the Empire State Building held for just over 8 hours, or all 87 hours of The Cure for Insomnia, which consists of poet L.D. Groban reading his 4,000-page poem of the same name. These are grueling films that I don't think were ever intended to be seen in their entirety. Or maybe they were, I don't know, but I really can't imagine Andy Warhol being too upset at anyone for not making it to the end of Empire, okay? I feel like that's probably why he made the film. Like, seriously, why are you guys still sitting here? It's 8 hours long and nothing is happening, all right? But anyway, I'm only scratching the surface of experimental filmmaking here, but I think it's important to mention that in addition to, all of its formal innovations, experimental cinema has always provided a lot of underrepresented and marginalized filmmakers the opportunity to find an audience and give a voice to the people that were not embraced by, mainstream cinema, especially during the age of censorship, which, we've talked a lot about in this class. And yeah, the influence that a lot of these films have had on filmmakers since the early days of cinema has been profound. In 2022, Sight and Sound magazine named Chantal Akerman's Jeanne Dielman the greatest film ever made. That's not nothing, okay? Only the most highly regarded film critics and film directors in the world vote on that list. And even if I can't sit through, 3 hours of watching a woman scrub her bathtub and boil potatoes, the people compiling the Sight and Sound poll wouldn't have bestowed that film with such an honor if it didn't have a tremendous impact on their work. And so I acknowledge that it's very unlikely you'll ever pay, whatever your local Cineplex is charging to take your boyfriends or girlfriends out to see an avant-garde film. But the influence that these films have had and continue to have on filmmakers in regards to their cinematography, visual effects, editing, sound design, etc., is endless, all right? So your assignment this week is to create a 1 to 3 minute experimental film or experimental video. You can make something very surreal and dreamy, like the example from Buñuel, or you can make something very abstract using whatever elements you have available. If you want to dye some milk red and drop it in a glass of vegetable oil at 120 frames per second with a blue gel on a strobe light, cool. I'm into it, all right? If you want to shoot a time lapse of the clouds for a few minutes and then reverse the film, speed it up and add some color grading, awesome, I'm into that too, all right? I just want to see something different, something unlike anything you've done all year. But what I don't want is a 16-hour film of the grass growing, okay? That's where I draw the line. So anyway, have some fun, use this as an opportunity to try something new, and yeah, I'm excited to see what you guys come up with. And then this week, I really struggled to find something to show you because I'm not going to make you sit through a feature-length experimental film. Even the most watchable ones, the ones that I really enjoy, like Last Year in Marienbad or Man with a Movie Camera, are just too much to force you guys to sit through, okay? So we are going to watch 2 short films, A Color Box by Len Lai, which is a very abstract animated film from the 1930s, and Meshes of the Afternoon, which is more of a dreamy, surrealist film by Maya Deren that I think you guys are really going to enjoy. And then we're going to finish up the year by watching 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is not technically an experimental film, but it certainly has a lot of experimental qualities to it. I mean, the Stargate sequence alone is reason enough to watch this film. But yeah, 2001 offers so many great visuals, and so if I'm going to show you a feature-length film that is, mainstream enough to hold your attention, but out there enough to possibly be called experimental, it's 2001. And this is such a great film to end the year on, because I really think if I could only pick one film to show you guys that sort of encapsulates everything that we've talked about this year, it would be 2001: A Space Odyssey. It just has everything, all right? So that's it. We'll start it next week, okay? And there you go, guys. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you had some fun. Hopefully you made some friends and completed some video projects that you'll look back on in a few years and be super embarrassed by, but then you'll look back on them a few decades later and you'll be really grateful that they exist, all right? And also hopefully, I know you think I showed you a lot of boring movies this year, but I hope that I at least introduced you to one film that you really enjoyed and that, maybe you wouldn't have seen otherwise, okay? So hopefully. That's it, guys. Thank you for joining me in this class. Please reach out to me if you're ever in a position to offer my future students a field trip to whatever studio or film set you happen to be working on, or if you just want to cast your old teacher as a featured extra in whatever film you're shooting. It'll really make me feel like my work wasn't for nothing here, okay? All right, guys, I've overstayed my welcome. Thank you for watching. Bye.